All right, we're bringing everybody on into our webinar. Welcome, welcome everyone. Great to see you all. And we're just going to give ourselves another minute to let everybody come on in and get settled. But it looks like we're going to have some fun today. Feels like Friday, but it's not. Every day feels like Friday sometimes. And then go ahead and turn off your videos too. We can keep it so that then you'll just see me and Netanya as well as the slides, but I'll go ahead and help you out too if you have any trouble. But let's kick it off. So everyone, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so thrilled to be able to chat with you all. And we've got a really, really good topic that we're going to be talking about. If you don't know me, my name is Beth Santos, and I'm founder and CEO of Wanderful. We are an international community of women who love to travel, but we do a lot more than just helping women travel the world. In fact, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of who we are and where we're coming from. And while I do that, I'd actually love for you to go ahead and drop in the chat who you are and where you're coming from. We have a lot of brands that are represented today. I'd love to hear who you're representing and or where you're coming from geographically, wherever it is, if it's in the US, if it's around the world. Netanya, you're in the DC area, right?
Yeah.
And I'm in Boston, where we are just starting to feel like the real grip of winter. So even though it's not winter yet, it's starting to really feel like it. So go ahead and drop in the chat, introduce yourself, let us know who's here. Lydia from Home Exchange, also in Boston. Welcome, Lydia. Thanks for coming. Madison is at the community and outreach team for Navy Savvy. Welcome, Madison. Great to have you here too. Christina, hey Christina, founder and CEO of Voyager, also in Boston. So we've got some good Boston representation today. Way to go. So go ahead, keep dropping them in the chat. Let's all meet one another. And let me introduce you to what we're doing if you haven't heard about Wanderful before. I mentioned that we're all about helping women travel the world, but we do a lot more than just giving consumers the tools to get out there. We actually talk a lot about some of the fundamental issues in the travel industry. Why is it that 80% of travel decisions are made by women, and yet there's such a lack of representation at the senior level of leadership and in our marketing and in our products and in our services? And so in addition to helping the women who love to travel, we also do a lot to advocate for the travel industry to be more equitable. And we work really hard to really amplify and promote the work of women who are creators. And when I say creator, that means a content creator, it means a social media influencer, it means a small business owner, it means an entrepreneur. It's anybody who's taking it into her own hands to change the face and change the impact of travel. And we really work to help them out. And if you've seen any of our work before, I think one thing that you'd be probably quite familiar with is our cornerstone event, which is the WITS Travel Creator and Brand Summit. This happens twice a year. We've been doing it virtually all through 2020. Hopefully we'll be able to join up together again in 2021. And this is a top-rated event that brings together content creators and social media influencers with brands to talk about issues in the travel industry, but then also build connections. I think having that network and giving our opportunity to really connect and meet with each other, that's how we can all push these agendas forward. So definitely come check us out. We'd love to send you more information about WITS if you haven't been there yet. It's really fun. People call it like a big hug and a reunion. So if any of you have ever been, feel free to drop how you feel about it in the comments too. But then we also do a lot of other stuff. And so this is just a quick bird's eye view of the Wanderful world. We run the twice annual summit. We also have a festival launching in 2022. It's a consumer festival. We have 50 chapters all around the world that go get together for local events. And we have an online membership community, which has actually been growing incredibly well over this year, especially at a time when we're not able to do a whole lot of travel together. And so we're all really missing it. And our online membership space has virtual events and activities and networking and ways to meet one another, both for just the women who love to travel, as well as creators and women who are building businesses in travel. Oh, and Christina says WITS is one of her favorite events ever. So Christina, you get a gold star in my book. Thanks for thanks for the promo. And I see lots of other great intros coming in. So I hope you're all reading. We have, oh gosh, Lena, who's in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, Megan in Chicago. Check it out. There's some great minds here. I hope that you all get to connect with each other over the chat. In the meantime, I want to introduce our speaker and talk about this particular topic, which I think is so important. We're talking today about how to work with influencers on a budget in 2021. And through our work with WITS and through our work with content creators, we at Wanderful do a lot of brand work. We're regularly talking with destinations, travel products, services about how to really build their marketing channels and work with influencers. And one of the things that I often get pushback on, and Netanya, I know you'll be able to comment a lot on this, is like, oh, this worry that it's this incredibly expensive or not very cost-effective thing. And I really want to take some time today to not only debunk myths, but talk about the realities and talk about how, in a lot of ways, if you're strategic about how you're using your influencer marketing, it can be one of the most cost-effective options. And where we are in 2020 is that our budgets are cut, they're down 50%, if not down 70 or 80%. We're trying to figure out how to plan for 2021, and we really don't know what's going to happen next. And we're in a place of where we're planning in a completely different way than we've ever done before. So that's why I thought this particular conversation would be so vital for us as we're closing out the year and thinking about what next year is going to be. If you're representing the brand side, I hope it gives you some really good ideas. If you're coming from the creator side, the same. I think we can all really learn from each other. And by the way, if you have comments, if you've ever been to a Wanderful event before that's been hosted by me, I love dialogue. And so in addition to inviting you all to join in the chat, I would love for you to share your insights, share your feedback, ask questions in the chat throughout the whole session. We're going to take a couple of breaks to do some Q&A from me to Netanya throughout the session, but also I can read off of the questions that you pose as well. So if there are things that you want to know or clarification that you'd like, just let me know. We want to make sure that we can be as useful for you as possible. And we will, if we do have time for Q&A at the end, we will make sure that we do that. But we also have a special offer from Netanya. So stick around because you'll be able to have some personal time with her tomorrow. So that's my teaser. So now that I've mentioned how amazing she is so many times, let me actually introduce Netanya. So Netanya Trimboli brings more than 15 years of hospitality marketing experience with a focus on influencer relations over the past 7 years. She was recently, and this is how I initially met her, the director of communications and PR at Hostling International. She was leading dozens of collaborations every year. And she's also the co-founder of the Study Abroad and Global Citizenship Influencer Summit that was hosted at the White House. Plus, she's the winner of one of Wanderful's Bessie Awards for influencer marketing campaigns, as well as the Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International Award for her influencer campaign work as well. So incredibly qualified, has so much experience in this space, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Netanya. Welcome to the stage over here.
Thank you, Beth, for that nice introduction.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you want to share with us. I'll go ahead and let you share your screen and just let me know if you need anything.
Okay, great. Is it all set to record?
Yep.
Okay, yep. Awesome. And I will also turn off my video just so it's not distracting. There we go. All right. So, hi, everybody. I am so excited to be speaking with you today. This is really a timely topic as we're seeing smaller budgets, as Beth mentioned, but there's still this strong desire to make this meaningful impact. And I personally really believe that influencers offer a lot of bang for their buck, and I'm excited to share with you how to unleash that potential. Well, the first step to working with influencers on a budget is to understand their value. And I mean really digging below the surface. I've been working directly with the influencer community a lot lately to help them recognize their own hidden potential. And what I'm seeing is that there is often a big disconnect and how influencers are presenting themselves versus what brands actually want to see. But the value is there if you know how to recognize it and extract it, and this part is essential for budget-conscious marketers. And the truth is, sometimes as a brand, we need to do the thinking for an influencer. Some influencers have a marketing or PR background, but many don't, and they don't fully understand our drivers, our marketing mix, or even how we measure success. So as a brand, we have to be proactive in molding our influencer relations strategy, not based on what the influencer is telling us, but on what we know they are capable of achieving. With this approach, you'll see influencers as more than the sum of their followers and be able to keep stacking value. Today's session will help you learn what to ask for in order to get the most mileage out of your campaigns, all with the intention of giving your bottom line that much needed break. But before we jump into that, I want to give a quick background on myself and where all this insight is coming from. As Beth mentioned, I've been working with influencers since back in 2013 and have done influencer activations with the White House, at the United Nations, and with the UN World Tourism Organization. But I definitely didn't start out that way. I learned through trial and error over the course of hundreds of collaborations on how to leverage these campaigns. During this time, I was leading the PR department for Hi USA, which had about 50 hostels nationwide. It's also a nonprofit with a nonprofit budget. So I had to fight for every limited dollar I wanted to spend. In the early days, my influencer strategy would be a casual exchange for a free overnight, for a blog post. There was no out-of-pocket cost, so it was easy to do this at volume. But after a while, that didn't really feel like enough or like it was even doing anything. However, I knew that when done strategically, influencers can offer a lot of value, but it had to be more than disconnected free exchanges. To really capitalize on their value, my whole department had to be willing to invest in influencers and treat them like the viable part of our marketing mix they were. They also had to realize this wasn't my pet project. Influencers could help achieve their core priorities too. And that's what really got our influencer strategy to the next level. We stopped seeing it as a separate thing. For influencer marketing to be the most effective, it needs to be embraced by multiple stakeholders and integrated into your entire department strategic plan. And when your team understands this, you'll really be able to make campaigns work harder and see those bottom line benefits. So let's start by talking money. There are several ways you can pay influencers, and the more value you can offer, the more forgiving they will be for smaller cash payments. So let's look at a few options. First, cold hard cash. So this one's fairly obvious, but it's where you pay a set price for a certain number of blog and social media posts. Influencers often have their own rate packages, which can also be negotiated. But if you're offering just cash, you may pay a premium. However, this option is attractive when you don't have the time or manpower to manage the logistics of other types of exchanges. For in-kind payment, you gift your product or service in exchange for exposure on an influencer's channels. Influencers especially like this option when you're saving them a bottom line cost like transportation or a hotel. This method tends to be well received when paired with a monetary payment, or if an influencer already has plans to be in your destination. Affiliate marketing works great if you want to incentivize an influencer to sell your product or service, but you have to have the technology to support it. There's an investment to get this model started, and it only makes sense if you're going to mobilize multiple stakeholders in the long term. Depending on your commissions, though, this can be very attractive to an influencer while avoiding having to pay them any hefty upfront costs. Lastly, get creative. Influencers have wants and needs beyond their bottom line. They want to grow their following, offer their audience new or exclusive information, get recognized in the spotlight, and have access to fun things to write about. So with that lens, what else could you offer an influencer? Do you have tickets to a special event, a highly distributed newsletter that could feature their blog, any high-end swag or merchandise? Think of everything you have to offer, and if you can create an attractive package, they may consider lowering or waiving their fees, especially if you can attach a dollar value to what you're offering. So I'm going to take my first pause here and chat with Beth a little bit to go over what I just shared.
Thanks, Netanya. This is such a helpful start in just getting an understanding here of what are the different ways that we're working with influencers and content creators. And I'd love for those of you who are listening into who have done influencer work to share some of the collaborations that you've done. One of the things that I wanted to touch base on first was what you said about in-kind as a form of payment. And I think this is something that I know I always got a lot and still do, when we're talking about compensation, because we're in a place now where a lot of times the influencer that you're potentially working with is asking for not just something in kind, but also something that is like a financial compensation. And the question is kind of, well, when is this the right thing to do? When is it not the right thing to do? And I think it's really important to keep in mind that this is always an exchange of value, right? And you have to first of all figure out what is the value of the content that the influencer is going to be creating for you, and what is that equivalent value that I'm offering. Because if what you're offering costs less than what they would have charged, then yeah, there's going to need to be some sort of financial compensation in there. But I think at the same time, I think even without that, I think it's also really important to keep in mind that travel is an expensive industry, right? And sometimes, I think influencers really pride themselves on being honest and being authentic and making sure that we're speaking in a real way to our audience. I'm never going to promote something that I haven't experienced before, or at least have a really strong understanding of. And so there is a bit of an investment, even in the in-kind space, to get somebody to work with you, because they need to try it out. And if you're an airline, that means they need to fly somewhere. And if you're a hotel, they have to stay with you. What are your thoughts about that, especially coming from the perspective of having worked with Hostling International? I'm sure you had to give away a lot of stays. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so that was probably 75 to 90% of my inquiries. Can I stay at your place in exchange for writing about it? And it during the off season or shoulder season, it wasn't that big of a deal because we weren't going to sell those rooms anyway. And so it wasn't the same as asking for a private room in Santa Monica in the middle of summer. So, the off season was definitely a lot easier to offer that. And from the influencer, a free room is a free room. So they're not thinking about high season, low season, whatever. But from the brand perspective, I think it is more cost effective to plan those activations during the off season. So that way you're not putting up somebody at the expense of otherwise selling that room. But you're right, it can't be the sole payment, because it's just, you get what you pay for too. And it doesn't work well if someone's like, hey, I'm going to be in your town, I already have plans to be here, so this is all I need. But if you're actually recruiting an influencer and expecting them to make the way to your property, take time out of their day, out of their schedule, I mean, you really need to pay for that time and for them to be there. So, one tip is you can always reach out to your local CVB and just kind of get on their radar that if there are ever any influencers coming to town, let me know. So that way you can kind of avoid having to pay those costs. But yeah, I think as a brand, we can't just say, well, the value of that room is $300 a night and you're staying for 3 nights. So, we're covered. There's a lot more to it than just that.
Well, and I think a lot of CVBs have to make that case as well. I know a couple are here on this call where, thinking about seasonality and thinking about, who's coming inbound, you're going to have an easier time negotiating with somebody who's saying, hey, I'm going to be in Madison, Wisconsin anyway, so I'm just looking for a place to stay, versus, they're coming, they're kind of pitching you on something completely exclusive. And so I think as much as you can bundle can be really helpful.
And the other thing too is if you're not paying the influencer, then you don't get as much creative control. If I'm just giving someone a free overnight, I can, maybe I send them a few main message points or something, but I can't say, and I'll get into content development in a minute, but I can't really say like, oh, this is our new promotion, or this is a campaign we want shared, and make sure you say this and don't say that. Like, you don't have that control over the content that you would when you're just doing kind of free or in-kind exchanges like that.
Who are you talking about when you talk about influencers? Is there like a particular, whether it's channel or whether it's audience size, are you talking about kind of Kim Kardashian level influencer? Are you talking about micro influencers? Like, tell us about some of your history and your experience.
Sure. So what I found is working with like those top tier influencers who, for the travel industry, I would say anyone with over 75,000 unique monthly visitors, which is very kind of a small pool for our industry. It's kind of like buying a Super Bowl ad. So if that ad is the only thing you're doing in your marketing mix, it's only going to be so effective. You really need to have other channels to support that ad. And I don't need to explain that because everybody here is kind of in marketing and communications. But it's the same thing in working with an influencer. You can't put your whole budget on this top influencer and think they're going to move mountains. So for people with smaller budgets, I definitely have had success with the micro to mid influencer level, which I qualify as someone in the 10 to 50 to 70, I guess under 75,000 unique monthly visitors, but usually the sweet spot is 10 to 20,000. And that's because they tend to have more of an intimate connection with their followers. And so they actually have more influence over those followers. You'll see higher engagements and more of that persuasion. Plus, they're more flexible. I find that some of those top tier influencers tend to nickel and dime more. Oh, you want an extra 2 week? That'll be $50. Whereas the micro influencers tend to just by nature pack more value into what they're doing because they're still trying to build themselves up and make a name for themselves and get that repeat business.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely think that for value conscious brands, that kind of that micro to mid is good. The other thing that I think is important to note is I hate unique monthly visitors because
even though you just said it.
I didn't know what you said. Well, it's what people understand as like how you define an influencer size. But how many views your whole site combined got doesn't really impact me. All that matters to me is how much is my one article going to get. And I've actually worked with one of those blog sites. It's like, oh, we have 1 million unique monthly viewers, but my article got 500 views, and which is the same amount as many micro influencers. And it's because they have so much content competing against itself that you just aren't going to get the 10,000 views you expected. So if you can ask from your influencers, what is your average number of views per article? I think you'll get a much more accurate representation of what you can expect to get out of that collaboration.
That's a really great point. And I think, to the point of flexibility, that's actually one of my strongest reasons why leaning into an influencer marketing strategy in 2021 is going to be one of your best bets, because you're really working. It's not buying, an ad. This is working with a person who is an ad, but it's a person who can say, hey, it's been a rough year for all of us in travel, and I'm going to add this in, or I'm going to cut this down. I think people are being a lot more flexible in general, because we all just want travel to get back on track when it's safe for us all to do that. And I think in that way, even going to a creator and saying, look, here's what I have to work with. I'll be totally honest with you. Our budget has just been slammed, but I really love what you're doing, and I'd love to find a way to make it work. I think to your point of seeing what else is valuable to them, is it, a lot of people are really looking for email subscribers. That's kind of the new currency right now. A lot of people are looking for other things that are money for them, but not maybe money for you. And so thinking about unique ways to be flexible, especially this year, I think is going to be really mission critical.
Yeah, and you raised a really good point too about kind of the long-term potential of the relationship. Like if you say, now this we can only do in kind, but as soon as travel bounces back, I want to do this big influencer campaign and I'd love to work with you again, and kind of, give them that carrot, if you mean it, of course. That can go really far because everybody gets it. Nobody has money to spend right now. But if, there's potential for the future, they might be willing to kind of develop that relationship with you.
Yeah. And I have a question that's actually come in from Katie that I want to read to you, Netanya. She says her company, A Bridge Academy, runs teaching and cultural exchange programs in Asia. They'd love to work with influencers and have previously had people that have had like YouTube channels with a moderate following on Instagram, et cetera. However, given that they have to really carefully screen their participants, they have their main program is a kind of Camp America type program with this matching process that allows you to work with kids. So they have this really kind of robust screening program. How can they reach out to influencers without being able to guarantee them a place? We already offer significant funding to all participants, so we'd only be able to offer influencers a refund of their $250 or £250, program fee. And is this realistic? Okay, so you're saying that you're already offering all of the in kind. There is a program fee that you could also refund for them. And so how would you be able to get influencers to work with you without being able to make any sort of guarantees about if they'd be selected?
Yeah, I think you need to think of it differently in what you're offering, that it might not be about, come here, participate, write about your experience. It's more about writing about the value of programs like these, using it as an example of how people can achieve whatever it is the mission of your organization is, and just doing more brand awareness. So, I mean, not in all cases do the influencers have to participate themselves. I know with High USA, we had a scholarship program. And actually, here's an idea. So with the scholarship program, it was $1,000 to travel the US and stay at our hostels. So what we did is we paid the influencer that $1,000 and said, pretend this is your prize money. Now create an itinerary and show somebody how they would spend their time here. So you can kind of do it more DIY, or say like, this is the type of things you would do on the program, do something similar and then kind of draw the parallels, kind of fake it a little bit, or find a way to just kind of, somehow recreate the experience. But I think as long as you're kind of talking about it in a way that promotes the mission of what you're doing, talks about the value of it, you don't actually need the influencer to be there.
And that's a great point. And I think it also has to do with just finding that right person, like I think if you found somebody that were really interested in this program that you're offering, I know that there are people out there that would be happy to participate, knowing that there's, not anything particular that you can offer beyond what you're doing here, which is already great, if you're covering lodging and flight and that sort of thing. But Netanya, I think that's a great point too, that it doesn't necessarily have to be, I'm going to cover all of your expenses and ship you over here and, cover your food and everything. Maybe the message is a little bit different, where you're not asking them to say, I've been here and this is what my experience has been, but you're giving them a way to kind of showcase this to their community. And that's kind of what you're paying for.
Yeah, and I actually think this is a great segue into the next section, which is about that campaign development and how to make the campaigns work for you based on whatever your goals are. So should we?
Let's do it.
All right. Okay. All right. So money aside, the campaign itself is where you will drive the most value for your organization. As I mentioned, influencer marketing should be an integrated part of your overall marketing strategy and not separated out as a tangential marketing tactic. This mindset takes influencer marketing from a cost center to a cost-efficient amplification channel for marketing activities already in your pipeline. So here's how to incorporate this strategy into your own efforts. First, identify your objective. It's important to know what you're trying to achieve by partnering with an influencer. While general brand awareness campaigns have their place, it can be hard to make the case for their value because this type of impact is hard to measure. So to set yourself up for success, you need to know what success looks like and how to measure it. Think in terms of web traffic, social media engagements, conversions, or whatever other KPIs are important to your organization. And in many cases, building off an existing marketing or PR campaign that already has a clear objective and KPIs is the best way to ensure your influencer strategy is measurable and also aligns with department priorities. So for example, maybe you're running a winter promotion that's designed to increase sales, or maybe you just have a hashtag you're trying to gain traction for. Having the influencer share this messaging will amplify your whole team's efforts and help prevent influencer marketing from being siloed. So next, Treat influencers like consultants. Too often, influencer marketing is treated like a transaction. Here's $500 in exchange for a blog post and 2 social media posts. Influencers are creative by nature and probably have tons of tried and true experiences to pull from to help you get the most out of your campaign. But many times they won't offer their opinion unless they're asked. So the best thing you can do is pick up the phone and have a meaningful dialogue back and forth. Ask for their ideas on how you can achieve your objective. Ask about what their audience responds well to. Have a brainstorm session on creative ways to break through the noise. In addition to new ideas emerging, this also makes the influencer have a more vested stake in your business. It's now their own idea on the table, so they are going to work harder to ensure it's successful. Next, think beyond the influencer's own channel. What additional assets could they create for your channels? Most likely, I'll bet you have a website or blog, social media channels, newsletter, stakeholder communication, and so forth, that I'm sure you have ongoing needs for fresh content, both written and visual. So many influencers actually prefer to be called content creators because at their core, that's what they do. And if you also see them that way, a whole new sea of opportunities open up. Let's say you work for a hotel company and have a chat with a content marketing team. You find out they want to hype up recent bathroom renovations in the annual report and on social media. And a close-up of the faucet would be really great to include, but a photographer would cost a fortune. Well, around the same time, an influencer reaches out who wants to collaborate. Well, paying them $500 to do a blog post for a general brand awareness campaign might seem out of your reach or even unnecessary. But if they could include a few high-res photos of that faucet, plus mention how nice the bathrooms are on social media, plus allow you to use a quote about their experience in your marketing efforts, well, now $500 sounds like a bargain, especially now that it's split across multiple budgets. And for the influencer, these are easy add-ons that only cost them a few extra minutes of their time. So when evaluating a collaboration, think of all your channels that you need to create content for. Ask yourself, which of these channels can this influencer also assist with? And it may not even be your content marketing team you need to talk to. It may be that your sustainability committee, for example, is working on an application for a prestigious award and would love photography of the new washing machines, but would have no way of getting that. So keep those lines of communication open across your organization and you'll keep unlocking new potential. Lastly, but very importantly, be painfully specific. One reason brands have gotten burned in the past is because brands and influencers have completely different assumptions. So take a look at the following chart and see how an influencer and a brand may interpret the same line item differently. So if your contract says a blog post about XYZ brand, well, the influencer assumes, well, 2 sentences is fine. Whereas the brand is thinking, well, this whole article is going to be about me, right? And if you just say a Facebook post, the influencer might think, well, I'll write about my overall experience, hashtag the brand at the end, and then just use whatever my favorite photo from the trip is. Whereas the brand assumes that the picture is going to be of me and the caption is going to be all about me. Similarly, if you just say Instagram post, the influencer might assume a few stories are fine, whereas the brand is thinking they're getting a feed post. And if you just say tag XYZ brand without defining the handle, the influencer might not be sure if it should be the corporate handle or the individual establishment handle, and they'll just pick whichever one they want. Whereas the brand wants you to tag the one that they want and would assume that the influencer would reach out if they weren't sure. And to be honest, as brands, we don't always make it easy for influencers to know how to tag us, because you might have that corporate handle and an individual establishment handle, and maybe there's even a special campaign handle. So make sure you're being very clear about how you want to be tagged. So you can see how the lack of detail really does leave room for interpretation, which ultimately results in the brand not having their expectations met. So to avoid these pitfalls, go into great detail in your contracts, even including what you otherwise believe to go without saying. And be sure to mention any main message points as well that are important to your brand. So, I mean, even if your brand has a defining characteristic, never assume your influencer will write about it unless you explicitly tell them. And these are all based on real experiences that I've had. So to sum up why you need to be painfully specific, brands and influencers have different assumptions. Lack of detail leaves room for interpretation. And then also include main message points because nothing goes without saying. And when you're watching every dollar, it's vital you're positioning your expectations to be met so that you're getting every dollar's worth. So with that, I'm going to take another pause and have another chat with Beth.
This is great. And Claire just added a comment as well saying including timelines is also really important to set expectations. Is it going to be live social media content? How long will it take to publish the blog post, etc.? So yeah, having those details written down. And actually, I personally think it also opens up the opportunity for negotiation even more. So if you are more on a budget, you know, if you say, right, I just want to post or whatever, then that might mean one thing. But if you can say, I am looking for, you know, this length of post about this thing on this day, that might open up to, well, if you wanted to do a few words less, maybe it would cost less. If you wanted to do a different day, you know, I think there's a little bit of movement there.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's also a really great comment here that I wanted to make sure that I have from Sherry. On behalf of influencers, many of us are ready to travel during the pandemic, potentially earlier than most people because we love travel so much and it's our career. It's a great way to get the word out early and quickly in 2021 as vaccines are available and things open up. We can turn around articles and social media very quickly. And I think that's a really strong point in just the sense of, you know, this might be your Q1 or Q2 plan is we're going to really get the creators and the influencers going because they can go in, have that travel experience quickly. They can, you know, they're not looking for external approval from another department. They can just make a call right away, go to your destination, write about it. And then on top of that, that's going to be all the content that everybody's going to be looking for in at least the first half of 2021, if not the whole year, is just how do I go? How do I travel? Where should I stay? What's safe? And I think influencers are going to be such a key part of that.
Absolutely. And, you know, brands should also be aware that there's a lot of influencers who are hyper local. Their audience is in a small regional area. And, you know, everybody knows right now that people are getting a lot of that driving traffic where people don't have to get in a plane. And so that's really a great opportunity to work with influencers who people in the metro city area, 45 minutes away from you, they listen to this person and are looking for little escapes. You know, they could be very influential in getting people in that community out to your establishment. So I would definitely kind of think about that, you know, draw a radius, you know, how far do people drive to get to your place, and then look for influencers who represent those areas.
Oh, and let's give a shout out to influencers who are local to you too, right? Because that's so key right now. You don't have to pay for airfare for them. You don't have to, you know, have them, they might not even have to stay anywhere. They might want to stay at home, but I think sometimes we overlook the people who are local to our city who can be the best advocates.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, come visit my city.
Yeah, here are my favorite things to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
So starting and then moving into the driving distance and then moving beyond that. Yeah, because I think if you're looking at Google, I'm sure, you know, the top search is going to be something like how to travel to X or, you know, what to pack when going to Y, I think, especially next year. And there are a couple questions. I know you've done a lot of this, Netanya. There are a couple questions and comments about contracts and people asking, you know, would they write up their own contract? Would they have the influencer do it? I know you've done it a couple ways. What's worked best for you?
So I find it best for the brand to write the contract because that way you can put everything that's important to you in there. You know, here are my main message points that you need to talk about. Here's what I don't want you to talk about. Here's when I'm expecting you to come visit and, you know, any action items you need to take before you get there. So that allows you to get that painfully specific. And then, you know, if you need to have your legal team review it as well. But the influencer probably doesn't have quite that level of detail that they need to include. It's more of a chance for them to review it and say, yes, I'm comfortable with all of this. So, I mean, I've had influencers send contracts before, but yeah, I always find I need to write like an addendum or something to go with it. So
Yeah.
I think it works better coming from the brand.
And then
And
you've got, yeah, sorry.
yeah, and you also, after a while, like it seems like a lot, but you get a template. They
Yeah.
need a little bit of customization, but on those main message points and standards and all that stuff, it's there, standard. So yeah.
And that's what I was going to say. Then you never have to think about it again of how to introduce, how people should talk about your brand, where the social media channels are. Christina in the chat is an attorney and was just sharing that as well. She said we should have a separate influencer template that sort of addresses those specific things. So,
Yeah.
And to the point of being painfully specific, I think, another thing to keep in mind is, even though you are creating that template or you are creating that contract rather, I do also think that it's really important to go back to one of your first points, Netanya, which is really treating these creators as consultants. I've had brands that have come to us and said, we're trying to promote this thing. We want you to copy and paste this line of text and use this photo and put it on your social channels. And we just say no, because I know as a creator, that's not going to work. It's not coming from me. It doesn't have my personal perspective. It's going to look like an ad. My readers are going to read it as an ad. It's not going to perform for you. And then you're going to be mad that it didn't do well, and you're not going to work with me again. So there's a balance too of, yes, having a template of how we talk about this, but in terms of the parameters of the project itself, really talking with the creator that you're going to work with and seeing what works for your audience. What do they respond to? What is your voice like? Because I think just, even though it sounds like it's faster and easier, it just is such a waste of money to just have something that people copy and paste.
Yeah. Yeah, and you bring up another good point too about just making sure you identify an influencer who aligns with your brand personality. Because if an influencer is known for being racy, but you're saying don't be racy in this post, then they're not being authentic to what their followers want and who they are. So yeah, you don't want to just kind of say, well, but they have so many followers, so I need to get in front of all these people. It really has to align with who you are so that they can be authentic and it'll come through in their posts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think authenticity is what creators are basing their entire livelihoods and their entire following on. And so, it's really important that, and that's where, I know we haven't talked too much about this yet, but kind of the after effect of working with an influencer. I know sometimes people will say, oh, well, they said, something that wasn't great about their experience. It wasn't all 5 stars, 5 stars, everything is perfect. And I think having that communication upfront and understanding that they have a responsibility to be authentic. There are ways that you can do that in a respectful way. But if they find that something is not right for the audience they're speaking to, then it's going to be in everybody's best interest for them to be real about that, so that then the people who are going to like that thing get that real opinion, And I think just saying, if you're paying somebody to just say, this is amazing, everything is perfect, then their readers are not going to keep reading either, because they're going to say everything they do is perfect. Why would I don't actually know what the real experience is. So
Yeah,
kind of having a balance there.
Yeah, and similarly, I mean, you can also tell the influencer, especially if you're not going to be on site when they're there, say if for any reason anything's not the way you want or something, please let me know so we can work through it. Like, I don't, I want to make sure you have a good experience. And if there are any hiccups, I'd really like to resolve it or something like that. Because, and it's not in their interest to, to do a bad article either, because then they're never going to get a campaign with you again. So they're not looking to sabotage you. But I think it is helpful if you kind of are present through the campaign and making sure they are having a good experience.
And I just dropped, in case any of you are small businesses and maybe don't have an attorney that you work with that drafts documents on influencer marketing, Christina Liebert, who's on this call at Counsel Up, and Jamie Lieberman at #Legal, both of them are great with small businesses and creators, and I'm sure would be interested in chatting with you about, how to do that. And Netanya, I bet you have some good recommendations too.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, more questions. So let's see, what else did I want to ask you? So economies of scale, I think, is another thing I wanted to bring up too. And we talked about, this time that you're negotiating with a creator, whether you should fly them out or whether you should work with somebody at home. I just wanted to give a shout out to things like conferences and networking events to cut down on that time. I recently, well, actually it's a couple years ago now, but there's data out there that says that the average marketer is spending 500 hours a year just researching and communicating with bloggers and content creators. And that's a lot of time. I mean, and you think about it, it's probably true. It's like 10 hours a week. You're probably spending a quarter of your time just kind of doing like the email exchange and doing the research. And I think it's worth it to think not just about the amount of money that you're spending on the campaign, but the amount of money in hours that you might be spending trying to find the right people to work with or negotiating with them. And that's where events, I have to give myself a little, shout out for things like WITS, but other, online, we have a virtual meetings day and any sort of activity where you can just focus on meetings and meeting a lot of people at once and vetting them all at once. That's going to cut down a lot of that budget as well, so that you can just focus on the campaign and not necessarily spend a lot of time like finding people. How did you generally find people to work with, Netanya?
Well, since I've been doing it for so long, it was really at the beginning, it was just incoming inquiries. I didn't have to source anybody. And then when we were looking to do kind of more sophisticated campaigns, definitely I would get really long, detailed lists from the different conferences that I went, and I would absolutely use the people I met at conferences. And then through events like the Influencer Summit, I started building more contacts. So, now, God, I have probably 300 personal contacts. And that's actually the reason why, several of my clients are working with me, is just because they want better access to influencers to recruit them. But, you can just create like an RFP and then look to organizations like Wanderful, and there's some other influencer agencies out there, or just influencer communities where they can share the RFP, usually for a price, and then you can kind of see who responds. But it is hard. Like if you've never worked with any influencers and you just sit down and Google travel influencer and just try to find someone, like that's just not going to work too well.
Can be rough.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, and that's, one other thing that we've started doing a lot this year that we had a webinar on a couple of months ago is this concept of virtual press trips, which I think has been really interesting in 2020, where the concept is not necessarily, getting like this whole perfect blog post out with somebody's experience in your destination, but via Zoom, introducing, giving kind of that preliminary overview of your destination, of your property, of, whatever it is that you're promoting. And I think in a lot of ways, it's a really nice way to kind of just test working with people en masse before you actually extend those invitations later. So that's kind of a nice thing to do too. Yeah, I think like sometimes you want to just dive in and get to know how somebody works a little bit. And by just extending an invitation and setting up an hour or two of some virtual introductions to what you're working on, it can be a nice way to really build that relationship.
And one thing that I tell brands too, and I tell influencers to do this as well, is when you finish the campaign, if you're the brand, ask the influencer if they can refer anybody else. And if you're the influencer, refer somebody else. Because it does save the brand a lot of time. And if you enjoyed working with an influencer, it's a really tight-knit community. Everybody knows each other, and they could probably rattle off a half a dozen of their colleagues who would be a great fit for what you're doing. Yeah, once you get one under your belt, like you can kind of start like that domino effect of discovering more.
And there's some great questions coming in, and I know you still have a little bit of content, Netanya, so I want to be quick on it, but questions on how to find local micro influencers, especially if online is not an option, and also any good sites for micro influencers or even beauty influencers. So people are like, where do we find these people?
Local influencers, that's a little bit different than my kind of comment about finding travel influencers in general, because with a local one, they're going to have that SEO that really is targeted to that destination. So, if you Google Washington, D.C. influencer, you'll probably get a pretty good swath of people popping up. And for that kind of instance, you might even get somebody who's outside the travel realm. It could be someone who typically just writes about, things to do in your local community. It could be someone who's focused on education or food or something else. But at this point, since they're local, it doesn't really matter. As long as it seems like their audience would be the type of people who would want to come to your place, that's someone who's great to work with. So, I mean, we're kind of in different times right now. So it's kind of a shift in how brands have traditionally worked with influencers, where it's really been about these travel influencers. But if you're looking for the hyper local, be open. And it's really about not just the demographics of your audience, but also the psychographics. So if you're kind of an adventure type of place, if the people, maybe it's about sports in, Boston, well, they might be the type of people that would also like adventure activity. So that could be a really good fit. So kind of start thinking about the types of personalities who do well at your destination or your place or your activity. And that's kind of a way to kind of help narrow in on who you should be working with.
Yes, and great point from Claire too. A lot of travel bloggers don't necessarily refer to themselves as influencers, so it might be worth looking for like travel blog in Washington, D.C. or solo female travel blog or something like that. Mm-hmm. And if you're representing a small business or a brick and mortar business, I think that reaching out to the CVB or the destination is really smart too, because they have media lists, and that's, if they're a member-based organization, if you're a member, if they're not, then they'll serve everybody. And that can be a nice way to benefit everyone. Now the destination is getting some promotion as well as your business at the same time. Mm-hmm. And the last thing I'll say about that, and then I'll let you go continue, Netanya, is that we actually are developing a platform that you all will really like. It's coming out in January, and I'll be sure to let you know at the end of this webinar more about it too. But in trying to find other creators to work with and other brands to work with, we're really hoping that can smooth out that system a bit more. But Netanya, I'll let you take it from here.
All right. Okay, so the next part I want to talk about is internal PR. And I am a huge fan and proponent of internal PR, because if you want to get budget dollars for future campaigns, you might have to prove to a range of stakeholders why it matters, but it may be a complete enigma to them, yet they could have a hand in whether or not you have the financial support down the road. So it's important to be able to articulate a campaign success in a fashion that resonates with your internal stakeholders. So to prove just how successful your campaign was, compile a report or presentation that shares the following. The objective. This lets your company know your campaign was strategically aligned with what the rest of the organization was working on. Next, about the influencer. Emphasize the audience demographics and psychographics, as I mentioned when you're vetting influencers. And this once again shows how your campaign is strategically aligned with organizational priorities. Next, get into your metric summary. So the impressions, reach, engagements to show the scope of the campaign. And you'll want to make sure that in advance you communicate with the influencer to let them know what you're expecting here. And then you need to give these metrics context, because those numbers might not mean anything to someone outside your department. So compare them to other campaigns, typical social media posts, and so forth to prove what a standout campaign this was. Then if the influencer provided additional photography, rights to content, a testimonial, or anything else of value, be sure to include that as well. And if applicable, include the estimated dollar value to what they provided. Next, you'll want to share your own metrics. So if this campaign positively impacted your number of followers or the reach or engagements on your own channels, include that as well. Lastly, since a picture is worth 1,000 words, check out the influencer's social media handles and grab snapshots of their top posts and of them interacting with your product or service. Show how they are a genuine consumer and a brand advocate. With this information compiled into a polished report, your boss or other internal stakeholders will understand why influencer marketing is so important to your overall strategy. Oh, did you have something? Oh, sorry.
Nope.
Okay. And so this will ultimately help you unlock additional budget dollars for future campaigns. So that's it for me. And thank you so much for listening. I hope you found that useful. If you would like more customized planning for your influencer marketing strategy, I do have a range of services available to help you meet your needs. I do everything from influencer vetting and recruitment to reviewing proposals to helping you create an integrated strategy that will soak up every last drop of value. And of course, there's no one size fits all, so I'm happy to work with you on a custom plan. So please check out my site, travelinfluencerexpert.com/businesses, and you'll also see a button to schedule a free 20-minute chat. And then this is how to get in touch with me. And now I'm happy to continue my chat with Beth and to take more questions.
Thanks, Netanya. And I know we're getting close to the end here, so I want to be thoughtful about everyone's time, but this has been so helpful. And I do want to drop your special giveaway for everyone who's watching this too. It should have hit your inbox already, and I'll make sure that it does if it hasn't yet. But everyone who's on this call and everyone who's RSVP'd to this event, Netanya is actually offering a free hour of office hours tomorrow. It's a special time. It's at, I think, 2 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow. And we've set up a Zoom call. So if you have additional questions or you're looking for some of her insights, you can come and join and ask your questions and chat. I was going to say one-on-one, but group on one with her and anyone else that's joining, share some ideas and really banter. So Netanya, thank you so much for being willing to do that for everybody on this call. That's so generous of you.
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to speak with you.
Yeah. Well, and I see some great comments in the chat, and I know we won't have enough time to reach all of it, but Rory, awesome point. She said, our brand's planning to work with travel blogs in different languages, but based in the US, we need more diversity. 60 million Hispanics live in the US. 37 million speak, read, and research in Spanish. I think that's a really great point, is, you know, thinking about the different languages that you could be reaching for your audience. You know, there's much more that we can do beyond just English. And the other thing I wanted to say is, everybody who's on this list, you also opted in to get email from Wanderful. That means that you're going to get monthly insights on the industry from our Wanderful community, plus information about that app that I told you about, as well as our conferences. So stay tuned, that's coming in January. You'll see all sorts of good stuff there. But hopefully you'll be able to really have this just be that jumping off point. And if you can attend office hours with Netanya tomorrow, then even more so, you know, you can really start diving into that 2021 strategy. Netanya, any last words or pieces of advice before I let everybody go today? This has been so valuable.
Good. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I would just say, you know, make sure that it's part of your marketing mix. Treat it like any other channel that you would use, and make sure you're giving it spokes, you're using it for all that it's worth, and that you're thinking creatively.
It really is. And I say this so honestly, it is just the best time to be working with creators, because of the unique nature that we are in the world. You can start reaching out to them now. You can get them out traveling in the beginning of the year, and be one of the first to be sharing your destination, your products, your services with people who are going to be very desperate to travel once we can all get back out there and do it again. So thanks again, Netanya. Thanks everybody who's been listening. Check your inbox for the link, as well as more information about how to continue to grow your influencer marketing strategies and meet other incredible creators around the world. And have a great afternoon, evening, everybody. Thanks all for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.